this episode, we're going to look at the augmented 6-chord pass-through. And what do I mean by this? Well, augmented 6 chords can be used to pass through chromatically to a chord like a secondary dominant. And I have a course on secondary dominants and how to use them. And if you don't know how to use that stuff, again, I suggest don't bother with this video. But you could actually use augmented 6 chords to pass through towards these kind of chords. Or to a chord from augmented 6 can usually resolve to a 6/4 chord. And if you don't know what that is, please don't watch the video. It means the 5th in the bass. Study chromatic harmony first. But the reason I'm doing this is because eventually I want to do advanced chromatic modulation like this, where we start using moves like this. And that's the reason I have the picture of Tchaikovsky on here. What part of makes up Tchaikovsky's sound is actually his relationship to augmented 6 kind of chords like this. Okay, so in that example, there was 2 augmented 6 chords on completely different scale degrees. And this is actually Tchaikovsky's actual reduction, which you could get at IMSLP. So there's 2 augmented 6 chords that occur here. So again, if you don't know how to use an augmented 6 chord in key, the normal augmented 6 chord, don't bother with this, because I'll link the course in this description and at the beginning. But if you don't know how to resolve these chords normally, then this is a waste of your time. Learn that first. That's the most typical way to resolve something like an augmented 6. And again, the reason I'm using this example is because everybody tends to think classical is this kind of Alberti bass sound and harmonic minor with some kind of melody like a... That's not the only sound of classical. So, they started to become highly chromatic in Tchaikovsky's time and totally broke from that sound. Someone like Debussy, for instance, would do something like that. That sounds nothing like Alberti bass music and your assumed classical sound. And you even find in this example, when you listen to the orchestra version, it doesn't sound like Alberti bass. So let's go through it really slow. I'll just play it really slow first. This is a great lesson in chromaticism. In your melody, there's the first augmented 6 chord. The second one, the normal one in key. Lots of chromaticism in the melody. Okay, so his melodic lines are extremely chromatic and interesting. So that's a far cry from the Alberti bass sound that we always associate with classical. So we got this 1/5 augmented 6 chord that resolves to a 6/4 chord. Okay, minor 6/4. Which is a normal resolution if you're in E minor, but that's the 2 chord of D major. So why am I saying augmented 6? Because that A is an A sharp, not a B flat. So he's passing through that augmented 6 chord to the 6/4 resolution of the 2 chord in key, or the 5th in the bass. That means 6/4. So another break from tradition is when he gets to the regular augmented 6 chord of D major, he goes to the 7th instead of expanding out like this. So this becomes a trademark of Romantic era music, is not resolving or introducing another chord that wants to resolve. So we're a far cry from this kind of music, the Mozart era music. And just take note, look at his melodic movement. It's highly chromatic, and it's very famous. It's a very famous melody too. So Tchaikovsky was a very gifted melodic writer. So if you're ever wondering if a lot of chromaticism can become memorable, yes, it can. So enough a history lesson and an example of it being used as a pass-through chord. Let's use it, just kind of a modernized version. Real simple. Let's use some simple triads mixed with some 7th chords and stuff. And we're going to also use this pass-through half diminished that we talked about in the first episode of this series. So I'll play through the first example. This is like tonicizing a secondary dominant with an augmented 6 chord right here. Secondary dominant, 2, 5, Same as Tchaikovsky's, but the augmented 6 chord is going to a B instead of an E minor and with the 5th in the bass. So you might want to use this to get out of this very typical kind of modern sound that everybody's using with the 1, 4, 5, 6 music. That seems to be dominating so many popular styles in our culture. So you may want to use it to break away from that sound. So combine it with like this 1, 5, typical 6, typical 4 move. Now the second time use the sequence below. Now you can repeat. The point is you could break away from that 1, 4, 5, 6 combo kind of sound. So still using D major on the 5th degree, let's create another second augmented 6 situation. Pass through to a 6/4 resolution. Now we're going to turn that into a half diminished and use the resolutions we talked about in the previous episodes. The half diminished usually resolves down a 5th below to a major or minor chord, which was discussed in previous episodes. So let's combine these two sequences here to make a full piece. So now you have alternatives to typical 1, 4, 5, 6 music and alternatives to secondary dominant music. And the cool thing is you could harmonize just the notes of the scale, just like you can with secondary dominants. I'm going to tap out the notes that are diatonic to D, but using secondary dominant kind of chords. Again, I have a course on how to use secondary dominant chords, everything all the way to the augmented 6 chords. So you're not left out, and I will actually link it again because musicians do have to make money. But you can now use a pass-through augmented 6 functioning chord and resolving it as you normally would an augmented 6 chord, but not really on the same degree as the augmented 6 chord of the scale. It's a pass-through augmented 6. You're literally passing through it to secondary dominance or else a chord in a 6/4 position, which means again the 5th and the bass. So now you can add another in-key chromatic harmony move that is not a secondary dominant to move around still chromatically by using pass-through augmented 6 chords like Tchaikovsky does in the Waltz of the Flowers. So how you personally use it is up to you. It's one more chord, though, that you can add to your arsenal when you start learning advanced chromatic modulation, which I hope to get to very soon on this channel, as I do have a basic chromatic modulation that I will link here in the end. All right, take care.